Hey there, my name is Glenn Blackett. I'm a civil rights lawyer with Charter Advocates Canada. Basically, the city of Edmonton is debating passing a bylaw called Bylaw 20700, a public spaces bylaw. You can also look below, and there will be a link to that bylaw. CAC has some serious concerns with that bylaw. In a nutshell, we say that the bylaw constitutes a massive violation of the Canadian values of freedom and democracy. Our concerns are too numerous to list in a letter or for me to summarize in this video. So in the letter and for the purpose of this video, I'll just pick three that we think are really significant. So first is big restrictions on Canadians' right to protest. The bylaw will clamp down on the rights of peaceful protest and assembly in a number of ways. First, basically the idea in the bylaw is that if a group of people of 100 or more, including a spontaneous gathering of people, get together in any space, any city space, then they need to first get a permit from the city to do that. That's already a restriction, a constitutional restriction on the right to assemble and express oneself. So there's already some problems in that. It's a more serious problem because first of all, instead of the bylaw just requiring, for example, that organizers give notice of the fact that they're going to protest so that the city can plan, or that the bylaw just apply to gatherings that are organized in advance, or that the bylaw only apply to protests where there might be some problem, like let's say there's going to be an organized attempt to get on the streets and block traffic or something like that. The bylaw just applies writ large to every assembly of people, spontaneous or otherwise, for any reason in any environment. So that's an I believe, is a clearly unconstitutional violation of Canadians' charter rights under sections 2, probably A, B, and C of the charter. The other problem with the bylaw protest restrictions are that in order to get a permit, you have to go to the city manager to ask for a permit. And the city manager has virtually no constraints on whether or not he or she issues a permit. If you read the bylaw, it might not seem that way, but I think if you bear with me for a moment, you'll see that's the case. So first of all, oops, that's my dog. First of all, the bylaw restriction, the city manager has the right to withhold consent in his or her opinion, and it says that must be exercised reasonably, but it doesn't tell us what reasonably means. And of course, it's just a function of law that a city official must exercise their powers reasonably. So adding the word reasonably in there doesn't add anything. That's already their legal requirement. The point is that there's no fences around when the city manager may or may not approve the protest. So we have another problem here. Not only does the bylaw then apply to everything, it applies in a way where the city manager has just absolute discretion as to whether or not the city manager would like to or not like to grant consent to the protest. So that's its own problem. Again, there's some words in there about or there's probably going to be some words in there about how the bylaw shouldn't affect constitutional rights. Again, that sounds nice, but I think when you read that technically with your lawyer hat on, it actually doesn't add anything. Governments are already not allowed to legislate or activate their powers in a way that's unconstitutional. Saying it in the document really changes nothing. I think that it's interesting. There's an old case, 1953 Supreme Court of Canada case called Sommer versus Quebec. And I won't get into the facts of that case, but the basic issue there was that the city of Quebec had created a bylaw where citizens, in order to hand out leaflets on the street, had to get consent of the police chief. And there was no constraint on how the police chief would exercise that right. And so in our warning letter to the city, I've quoted from that decision, and I'm going to paraphrase this slightly, but what the Supreme Court of Canada said there was, what is proposed before us is that expression be placed under the uncontrolled discretion of a municipal officer. a more objectionable interference, short of complete suppression, with that dissemination, which is the breath of life of the political institutions of this country, than that made possible by the bylaw can scarcely be imagined. So, commenting on a bylaw very much like what the city of Edmonton is now contemplating, 75 years after the Supreme Court of Canada commented on this, the city is passing what, to the Supreme Court's imagination back then, was one of the most profound violations of constitutional rights to democratic assembly and debate. So that's the first major problem the bylaw has. It has, I believe, wholly and totally unconstitutional restrictions on protest, which is not to say that you can't in some way regulate time, place, and manner of protest or other kinds of assembly, but the way that the city has done it is just completely wrong.